Hello, everyone. Welcome to Health Paradigm, the Healthy Lifestyle Interview Podcast with myself, Jane Adadia. Today, we have a very interesting person joining us, and his name is Georg Ritschl, and he is the founder of Orgonise Africa, and he's here today to talk about his Zappers. What is a Zapper? It's a very interesting question, and how they can help you. So a very warm welcome to Georg. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, and hello to all your listeners. Fire away with your questions.
Well, thank you for being here, Georg. So you are the founder of Orgonise Africa, the home of Zappers, and I suppose the big question is, a lot of people actually have mentioned the word Zappers to me, and you should try zapping. But what is a Zapper? Let's start with that. What is a Zapper, and how did you get involved with Zappers? Could you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, let me maybe start with a story and then get to the Zapper in detail, because the Zapper for us is actually part of a bigger story, and that story started in 2002. When I was researching a lot of alternative ideas, especially in the field of energy. And I came across one particular gentleman by the name of Don Croft, who had more or less single-handedly, I would say, started the Orgonite movement, although he never wanted to call it a movement. And he did that by adopting the technology of Wilhelm Reich, Dr. Wilhelm Reich. I'm going to say more about him later, and create an Orgonite cloudbuster, which was simple to build and looked very convincing. And I wanted to immediately replicate that. And he also, Don, encouraged that people replicate his inventions. And
so you actually spent time with Don. You've met him, and
I did spend time later with him. I mean, I got into a conversation with him, which was actually very inspiring and stimulating, and started first with the Orgonite, and the Zapper came into play later. So Don had basically pioneered two things, and that was the application of Orgonite, which is not his invention, but the invention of a gentleman by the name of Carl Welz. But Carl Welz never used it for massive environmental healing. He used it for a kind of radionics application to enhance the performance of athletes and all kinds of things, all legitimate stuff, but he never connected it with the Wilhelm Reich idea of the cloud busting and the environmental healing and all that. But we get to that. And Don had, on the other hand, developed a thing which he called the Terminator Zapper, which was based on the original research by Dr. Hulda Clark, and he combined that with the Orgonite energy healing components, which gave it a new quality. Okay.
So Dr. Hulda Clark was the original person for Zappers.
He's also not the inventor of zapping. I mean, zapping is relatively broad in its origins, because a lot of people have come across the fact that our bodies are electrical. They are electrical in nature, and so the fact that mild electric currents have some curative effects has been discovered by many people. For example, Becker, what's his name? About the Beck Zappers, and various other researchers have found that. And there is also some clinical work done on pulsed microcurrents, which has been published in scientific magazines, but it's never been allowed to make it into the mainstream. Okay, but basically, let me say what a Zapper is, and it's not very mysterious. A Zapper is actually the application of a mild direct current to the body. And ideally it's a pulse direct current, meaning a current that is switched on and off. But it's not an alternating current. It's a current that flows in one direction. And that's basically what a zapper does. So Hulda Clark's zappers were pulse generators where you had to sit and hold an electrode in each hand, for example, and then you would sit for half an hour. Or she had quite a complicated protocol where you had to sit for 7 minutes and then take a break and then another 7 minutes and so on and so on and so on. And Hulda Clark's research has been very far-reaching and very detailed. She wrote several books, and the most famous one is her first book called The Cure for All Diseases. And her basic understanding of disease was that disease is caused by toxins and parasites, whereby the toxins, meaning mostly chemicals, but also radiation overload and all that, is what weakens the body and allows parasites to thrive. Okay. Mm-hmm. And with parasites, we mean things like larvae of all kinds of hookworms and things that actually live in our body. The American Center for Disease Control has estimated the average parasite load for every American as about 500 grams or half a kilo. Wow. Or 1 pound. Okay. That's living creepy crawlies that live in your body.
Ooh, oh my God.
Yeah,
making me shudder, George.
Make you shudder. And that's actually, according to Hulda Clark, the main problem that we have. So
you're saying, George, that we all have these living beings inside of us. Mm-hmm. So we have living parasites, worms,
yes,
larvae. I can't imagine anything more disgusting than these kind of things hatching their eggs, and
they are naturally occurring in our intestines, because if we eat undercooked meat, or things like that, we do swallow things like that. Or when we play with our dogs and we don't wash our hands every 5 minutes, and dogs carry these. And the thing is that in a very healthy person, there is a strong barrier between the intestine and the rest of the body. Now, when your body is weakened by industrial solvents that we all deal with in our household chemicals and so on and so on, and even if we don't consciously do that, the bottling companies that bottle soft drinks are using methylated spirits to wash the bottles, which is a toxin that also weakens the barrier. So there are lots of things that break down that barrier, and then these things start invading the rest of the body. The intestine of a healthy person is quite well equipped to basically, have these things going through, and they're being excreted, and that's that.
And also, it's possible. Well, actually, I'm sure it's very possible that a lot of these worms and parasites come because of poor diet choices, junk food, sugary foods, all that kind of thing.
Sugary food also breaks down your immune system and allows candida to grow and all kinds of things. So
I think this is just another point, and this is a whole different discussion altogether. But just to mention to everybody that this is why it's important to clean your colon out regularly because of this. This is just one thing that I'm saying. To keep your colon completely clean, doing bowel cleansing now and again. But anyway, it's a whole different subject altogether. So we'll stick to the zappers for today.
But what we know now is that the biome that lives in your colon is very important for your general health and even for your rejuvenation and regeneration. So there is new research about longevity, which actually emphasizes the importance of your gut biome. So I'm not even sure if cleansing, this colon cleansing, if you should do that too often. I'm not sure, but it's obviously good to
if you
remove all caked stuff there. So, but let's not get into that because it's not my expertise, and and there are people who know a lot about this, and then maybe you should invite those.
Absolutely.
Basically, what the zapper does is it pumps electrons into the body, okay? Which means that in electrical terms, that means a negative charge, but don't get mistaken by the word negative. It's not negative. It just means there are more electrons. And in this environment of a negative ionization, disease organisms do not thrive. They actually die and shrivel up and get broken down and excreted, okay? And this basically is affecting parasites, bacteria, viruses, and even cancer cells.
Wow. Okay.
You can say that the zapper helps the body to break down diseased tissue, or tissue that is not energetically positive and part of the positive environment. You know, we consist of millions of bacteria, and the difference between a bacterium and a body cell is actually fluent. You know, we are actually more and more discovering that we are more a colony of living organisms than anything else. You know, so in the end, people ask me, how does the zapper now know what is a beneficial bacterium and what is not beneficial? You know, I can only tell you what my understanding is. My understanding is that there is different levels of how you can look at that. There's an energetic level where, for example, Wilhelm Reich was finding that cancer is an energy disease. Cancer has something to do with stagnating life energy in the body. He called that energy organ. Now, the Chinese medicine will will say that the qi is not flowing. The Ayurvedic medicine will say that
the prana.
You know.
Yeah.
So there is this energetic thing where you can say when the energy flows, the tissue is healthy and all the organisms are working in happy symbiosis, right?
Yeah. Well, we are energetic beings. We have an electrical current.
Yeah, where the energy is stagnating, you also have less oxygen. You have what you call anaerobic organisms, you know, which is basically a process of decay. And so you have energy flowing or stagnating. You have acidity or alkalinity, right? You have negative ionization or positive ionization. These things seem to coincide, you know, and it depends on from which level or from which perspective you look at it. But you can see that in these different modalities of alternative healing, they all basically discover the same thing, but they see it from a different angle or from a different perspective. By which I want to say that all these angles are valid, you know, but they are sort of almost like layers on top of each other.
It's just a different way of looking at it, but it's the same thing.
And you see Hulda Clark, who was actually, she is late now, she died a few years ago. She was a microbiologist and she saw it mostly from that angle. And she had some very interesting resonance technologies in order to test for the presence of certain pathogens and organisms. But she was also basically, they tried to shut her down. She had to establish her clinic in Mexico, you know, because in the United States she was persecuted. And we find that again and again, that whenever somebody is onto something and they make, in the full understanding of having found some medical truth, you know, and they make big pronouncements, then they're being shut down. And that's why we don't make pronouncements.
This is the threat. The minute we try to do something good for humanity, they try and shut you down. So we have to be very careful what we say.
One way of talking about this, and that is from our own personal experience. You know, we only, because we cannot generalize, we cannot say this is curing X, Y, Z. We can only say what we have found, what it has done for us, and we can talk about people that we know that have used it and have experienced X, Y, Z. As soon as you start making general claims, you are opening yourself up to relentless persecution.
You are right. You are right.
You know, and it's very sad because the so-called evidence-based medicine of the medical establishment is actually often based on much less evidence than they want to make us believe. But they have got the millions to fund huge, big studies and basically buy in the expertise that will then say that this and that, you know, and then it becomes a kind of an approved cure. We cannot compete with that kind of mechanism. You know, we can only. I mean, I think what is important to understand is that what we are promoting is a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle where you take responsibility for your own health and for the energetic quality of your environment. Mm-hmm. And you do that at your own cost, and you do that without trying to convince anybody or whatever. You know, you try it out, you see, does it work for you? Does it help you? And if you're happy with it, you may want to do even more in that same direction. But the only thing that we can do is to invite people to try out things.
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
Take their own life, take responsibility for their own life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's up to the individual if they want to try this, they want to experiment on themselves, to give this a go and to see what happens. You really don't have anything to lose by trying something. So I just want to go back to what a zapper is. I just want to summarize, just for the sake of clarity, that you are saying that the zapper is a small. I've got one in my hand here actually. It's a small electrical device that produces a certain electrical frequency, right?
Yeah.
And you can put that on any part of your body that you wish. So on your arm or your leg or anything like that. And it's very easy to use. So if you could just explain how you could use something like this.
Well, the idea of the zapper is that you use it every day for about half an hour or more. Half an hour is kind of the lower minimum. And you can wear it anywhere on your body, and you can do other things while you're wearing it. So you could have it on your arm, on your upper arm, while you're busy working on your computer or whatever you do. Even light mechanical work. I mean, you shouldn't sweat too much because then the resistance of the skin goes down and too much current will flow. I personally wear mine under my foot when I'm sleeping. I find that very effective and very energizing and also very curative, because in the arch of my foot I have all the meridians coming together. I've got the foot reflex zones and I've got the blood vessels close to the skin. At the same time, the skin is not too sensitive. You know, the zapper, if you apply it on the soft parts of the skin, like on the pulse, for example, it can give you burn marks after a while if you don't move it around a little bit. You know, and sometimes people forget to move it around and then they get like burns. So you want to use a part of the body where the skin is not too soft and too sensitive.
So you're saying the arm is ideal? You could just put it on your arm?
I mean, we make our zappers with little straps, so you can wear them on the arm, you can wear them around your ankle, or you can wear them under the foot. But you could also apply them topical if you have a particular health problem that is concentrated in one spot. You can actually apply the zapper directly where that problem is.
And just going back to what you were saying about
it's like cancer of the pancreas. Also, you cannot use my strap because the strap is not long enough. Okay. Then you must use it you must just put it under your clothes, you know, and it must have skin contact.
Yes.
And so there are two little electrodes. We've got them in copper and in silver. We used to make gold, but we are stopping that now because gold is becoming too expensive. And it's not necessary really. So we've got them with pure silver electrodes and copper electrodes. And the thing that differentiates our zapper from the classical Hulda-Clark zapper, apart from the fact that it's compact and in one box, is the Orgonite component. So and that is basically Don Croft's addition to the zapper idea, that he added a block of Orgonite. I'm going to talk about that just now, plus a neodymium magnet and a special coil called a Möbius coil, which is creating a scalar energy from that electric pulsing that we do. So all these things work together to create a very strong bioenergetic field that we also call Orgon field, but you could call it chi or prana or whatever you want, whatever attracts your fancy in terms of describing life energy. And so that is adding another layer of healing. So it's not enough to just eliminate parasites, but you also want to help the body to rebuild and recover.
So this Orgonite that you are mentioning is in the actual zapper. So there's a little slab of it in the zapper. If I open it up, it's in there.
These things work together because the coil is sort of creating a scalar electromagnetic field, which is then also exciting the Orgonite, and there are 2 healing stones also in the circuit, coiled by the wires that lead to the electrodes, and that's an amethyst and a garnet, and then the neodymium magnet. So all these things basically work together to make this into a very powerful healing package. And actually Don Croft only shared the exact mode of how to build these things with myself and a guy named Andy Schwarm in California. And so we didn't just copy him, he actually allowed us to use that principle that he developed. Basically that's all I can say about the zapper. It's people have had successes with all kinds of even severe conditions, but I'm not going to go out and say it can cure X, Y, Z, because that would be suicidal.
Understood. But you have done a lot of work.
I also can honestly not say if it will always work, or it's just something worth trying.
Yeah.
The thing is that it inevitably seems to break down those parasites, and a lot of people who have heavy loads of parasites go through quite a healing crisis with the zapper. So you might find that you get skin rashes and that you actually feel miserable for a few days or maybe even 2 weeks, because breaking down all that diseased material can be quite a load on a body. Okay. I've seen that with quite a few people, and then often people will panic and stop zapping because they think it's making them feel worse than before, which is obviously not the case, because they have to go through this and get rid of that.
It's a detoxifying effect. It's
quite hectic for some people.
So this zapper, as well as killing parasites and fungi or fungi, yeasts and mold, can also help to kill viruses.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So as we know what's going on in the world at the moment with the coronavirus and things like that, I just want to
see, I haven't personally met anybody who has been tested positive for this coronavirus, and that's actually typical for this hysterical crisis that we're going through, that it's actually a very small number of people that are affected. And I think it's much more a psychological scare operation than actually a real health crisis, if I may say so. But so to make pronouncements on the coronavirus is difficult, but I don't see why it shouldn't be effective.
But but George, you could say as a preventative measure, people could start zapping to keep their immune system strong.
See, I'm only allowed to say things about my personal experience, and that's also the only thing I feel comfortable with. And I can only say that whenever I have a flu coming up, I put the zapper on and the flu disappears. Okay.
Okay, that's interesting. That's
Yeah.
interesting. So,
That's where I put it under my foot and I sleep with it for 8 hours. Okay. And then basically, and the flu in most cases disappears quickly.
brilliant.
Whether the allergy works on this rare virus, I don't know, because I honestly do not know a single person who has it. Even though they've closed they're basically closing the whole economy down over this, which I think is much more scary than the actual virus.
It
Because
is.
I don't know how middle class entrepreneurial businesses can survive that if it goes for longer than 3 or 4 weeks.
It is difficult. I mean, here in the UK, they've shut down pubs, cafes, restaurants
I mean, these
from
people are
last
not
night.
normally sitting on a gigantic buffer of cash. They're paying rent to their landlords. If they run a cafe or a pub, they're paying employees, and they've got stock that goes to rot. I mean, it's devastating for a lot of these businesses.
Definitely, definitely.
So I hope that this madness will be over soon. And I don't want to embrace the panic over the virus itself. I think the virus is actually a minor problem. I think there's some other stuff going on. I mean,
Me too. Me too.
Too much into that,
Yeah, and we're not going to say too much on that because it's very, very controversial. And like I said, we don't want to make too many statements on this.
South Africa, we have allegedly, and we all know that the tests are far from really very reliable. We have about 200 so-called infected people. We had one of them dying apparently, and yet we are closing down everything. We are closing down public parks. We are, encouraging people to stay at home, and soon it might become enforced. And it's bizarre. It's totally bizarre. And probably the economic damage will lead to impoverishment and misery for so many people that thousands of them will die because of poverty. That is just unspeakable.
It is very sad. I'm not sure how we're going to recover from this.
We'll see. I mean, there's a lot of talk that behind the scenes they're working on an economic reset because the financial system is basically finished and everybody... I mean, I've been talking about the financial system even longer than about Orgonite. That's how I started getting interested in, let's call it alternative history, is basically the strange financial system that we have. And I think what's happening, but that's me, and is that basically that debt-based Ponzi scheme that's called the financial system has reached its maximum expansion and cannot work anymore. And it's been creaking in the seams for the last 10, 15 years. And now is probably the point where they will cut everybody's bank account by 1/10, and maybe relieve some debt and get some tension out of the system and start a new currency or something.
It's very scary.
They need a major crisis in order to pull this off. And they've just found this little virus that is not very harmful on its own. It's actually not too scary, and my opinion is not very popular even among my acquaintances here. They're all completely hypnotized by this, what is on. But I would say if nobody had said that there is a thing called coronavirus, whatever, we wouldn't even have noticed a major flu epidemic, or there is not even a real increase in flu, like they call the seasonal flu outbreaks. It wouldn't even be a blip in the statistics. I don't know what to make of certain spots where things seem to be hotting up, like in northern Italy and in Iran. There might be something else going on there. It might not even be the same. I don't know. But generally, to shut a whole country down because 200 people have something that most people agree will lead to flu-like symptoms, with a mortality of somewhere between 2 and 5%. I think it's completely out of whack.
Mm. Yeah, it's
But
very very odd. It's very dramatic and it's very
it is being
extreme
pushed
measures.
out of, I mean, it doesn't matter what television channel you switch on or what WhatsApp bloggers thing, you cannot escape talking about Corona. There is no other issue anymore. Doesn't matter who you meet and who you run into.
Exactly, exactly.
Corona, Corona, Corona.
This is the subject on everybody's lips. It's like nothing
Yeah,
else matters at the moment. This is the main thing.
yeah,
And I think, yeah, I completely agree with you. I think the lockdown of this country, the economy, offices closing, businesses closing is far more scarier than the actual virus.
yeah. The
Um,
virus
I think
is
it's
actually,
very, very hyped up. I think the whole thing is very hyped up, it's very exaggerated, and it's not as bad as people think it is. I know people have
it's a
died.
triple wonder. You see, I mean, I'm not always a big fan of David Icke, but he's just given a very good interview. What's it called? It's a kind of a London-based show host. I forgot what he's called, but he's been talking about this agenda for total control and mandatory vaccinations and so on. And he's actually introduced he's quite good in coining new phrases, and he's introduced the Hunger Games Society.
Okay.
As a kind of, have you seen the movie The Hunger Games?
A long time ago, yes.
Yeah, it's quite a nice one. Where you have got that crazy city elite,
Yes,
that
yes, yes.
luxury, and then you've got like bread and games and circus for the masses,
Yes.
and then the oppressed underlings. Then you have kind of a military police layer that makes sure that the masses cannot revolt,
Mm-hmm.
and that still have bread and food and live quite well. And then you have the people in the districts, and they are basically non-entities, and that's basically where David Icke thinks it's going, and the steps are mandatory vaccination, total control of your movements, and so on and so on and so on. And the way he's been describing it over the years is that they're trying to achieve these goals with a tactic that he calls problem reaction solution. I'm sure you have heard about that.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, and I think that's one of David Icke's great contributions to the whole understanding of how things work. It's basically those who are scripting our reality in the background are creating a problem where everybody then agrees, oh my God, it's a problem. Oh my God, I'm going to get the virus. People are not even shaking hands anymore. Friends have cancelled dinner invitations. It's all ridiculous.
Totally.
But the gym is empty. People are afraid. The gym has never been as clean as it is now, which is fantastic. They're wiping down those water taps 5
Yes.
times every 20 minutes. I do appreciate that new cleanliness, especially in Africa. It's kind of a novelty. And maybe some of that is a good thing to last. But so problem reaction solution means create a horrible scare, and then come up with something that they wanted to do anyways and say, no, this is the solution for the problem.
Exactly. So what they do is that
in this
case they create the problem however they wanted to create it, and the solution that they always wanted to deliver anyway, they present it to you. They present to you and say this is the actual solution, which is what they wanted anyway. It's all absolute manipulation.
Yeah, you see, David Icke has been talking about microchipping the population and mandatory vaccination forever. Okay, and that's what is happening in front of our eyes. Is that the social pressure is so enormous, and I'm absolutely flabbergasted by how everybody is suddenly talking about social distancing as if that had been in their vocabulary for the last 20 years. It's just amazing how such vocabulary is introduced and suddenly it's in everybody's mouth. And so social distancing, so they can basically finish us off on our own,
And
We
also,
won't,
and also, George, the other scary thing is this thing
we
called
won't notice what's going on.
self-isolation, which is another term that nobody ever spoke about before.
Yeah,
But now
yeah.
everybody's isolating themselves, totally locking themselves up at home.
Voluntarily. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I want to go out and hug people, but they will probably slap me in the face, or you know.
Okay, I know I said before that I'm not going to say this, but I think because we've got to the stage in this conversation where
Yeah.
we have
Sorry.
revealed a few things, and I'm not going to be afraid to say this, but I'm going to now just mention this point because we've already said a lot about this, is the coronavirus and 5G. It's time that I say this because you've mentioned a lot about David Icke and
Yeah.
mandatory vaccinations, and I wasn't sure whether to say it or not, but no, I'm going to say this now.
Yeah.
The coronavirus and 5G. There are rumors, there are talks, there are discussions all over the internet. People have told me, I've been reading about it, I've heard it from I've heard it in hearsay, that there is apparently a link between the coronavirus and 5G. I was hesitating before, but no,
Yeah.
I'm going to say it this time. And do you have anything to say on that? Please say it.
Well, with the necessary caution, okay, because I'm not going to make pronouncements as if I had personally researched this. We have been aware that cell phone technology as such is contributing to sickness because it is, in our understanding, creating a negative stagnant energy. Okay, and in that sense, 5G is maybe only adding some intensity there. I don't even think that it's creating a totally new problem. This is actually where our Orgonite works comes in, and we have been since 2002. Basically, we have been what we call gifting cell phone towers because we understand that the hard radiation that is basically microwave. It's the same radiation that you use in order to grill your chicken, okay, in your microwave. I don't recommend doing that, by the way. I think it's very bad for your food. But it is still a popular implement, right? People have these things at home and they put their TV dinners in there and
Yeah.
eat them.
I don't use a microwave anymore, George. I've made it a rule. Other people in my family use it, but I don't use it at all. I rather have cold food than use a microwave.
I never had one in my life. And I had a restaurant for a while. I forbid my chefs to even use it or have one in the kitchen to warm up portions, although it's very convenient for a restaurant, to have kind of prepared hamburgers or things like that you can put in there. So anyways, the hard microwave radiation is creating in the ether, it is creating a stagnant field, and people who are perceptive to auras and things like that can see that as a dark cloud around each and every cell phone tower. Actually, it's not just a cloud, it's not amorphous, it's actually got the shape of a toroidal field, which looks from the side like a flat melon or a flat pumpkin in shape. And it is kind of anthracite colored when you look at it. And for a normal cell phone tower, it's about half a kilometer in diameter. Okay. Now, the moment that we put Orgonite into the influence field of this cell phone tower, the whole thing changes completely, and the energy becomes visibly colorful, and you can also observe changes in the sky in terms of how the clouds look like and all that. So that's been actually the main work that we've been doing. The Zapper for us is a product that everybody should have as a matter of, call it personal hygiene, like brushing your teeth, brushing under your fingernails and general body hygiene. You just use a Zapper. It's not very expensive. It lasts you for a long while and it saves you hundreds of pounds or whatever your currency is in terms of medication and supplements. But the actual work that we've been doing is this organ gifting, and we've put out more than 30,000 little tower busters in southern Africa. But we've also done this work in Europe and in Russia and to a small degree also in China. And we've seen that leads to a revitalization of the whole land, and very often helps to stop droughts.
It's amazing, amazing. So you're
But
saying, I just want to, sorry, George, I'm
yeah.
just going to interrupt here. You're saying that you are gifting these tower busters at cell phone towers, and it changes the whole energy field, the whole energy pattern from a dark, cloudy energy field to something colorful and bright. And you're saying it has an effect on the clouds and the sky above?
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think people want to visit our website. There is quite a bit of expedition reports. I'm sure that you've already seen some of them. And there's also an info section where we talk about the question of proof, like how can you actually demonstrate that this orgonite is doing something. And one of the great, let's call it bodies of evidence, I would like to call it, is our combined expedition reports, of which I have created a bit of a condensed version in a post called Proof, Orgonite Proof. We have also made experiments with plant growth and orgonite. One of those experiments is also on our website, where we basically use 2 cell phones to irradiate a sample of water, 1 liter in a glass carafe. And we did that by 2 cell phones calling each other for half an hour. Then we did the same with the same 2 cell phones, but this time they were equipped with an orgonite shield. And then we did a third sample where we just took ordinary tap water and did not do anything to it. Mm-hmm. And we used these 3 different samples. So let's just recapitulate. One sample is cell phone radiated without orgonite protection. Sample number 2 is irradiated with orgonite protection. Sample number 3 is just normal tap water. And then we use that to sprout the same amount of chickpeas on my kitchen counter, exposed to the same temperature and the same light, standing next to each other. Okay. And the interesting thing was that the irradiated without protection, they came out after 5 days. So we did exactly the same, watering, soaking a little bit, decanting, and so on. We did exactly the same protocol with all 3 samples. And the one with the irradiated but unprotected, they were basically underdeveloped, and they were already starting to rot. They were slimy and starting to become mushy and rotty.
This is because of the radiation from the cell phones?
Apparently so. Okay. I can't really, it's for others to make that connection. The neutral tap water sample came out normal, I would say. They were not rotten, but they were less developed than the ones that we had used the cell phones with the orgonite. Okay. So what this seems to suggest, and that is consistent with our other observations in the environmental healing, is that the orgonite actually takes that electromagnetic radiation and turns it into something positive, which is actually better than only just switching those cell phone towers off.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So this actually, George, is more beneficial than just normal tap water or just normal protection against those harmful waves. This is actually giving a beneficial effect. That's really interesting.
They had about 15% more biomass, because I weighed them obviously after I dried them off. They had the longest and healthiest green shoots, and they were just looking like proper, brimming with energy, super healthy sprouts. Okay, and that's the thing.
Incredible.
What we think is happening is that the damaging effect from the microwave is not the electromagnetics as such, it is the effect it has on the ether. And the ether is a concept that doesn't exist in present day mainstream science, but it has existed for millennia. They've only abandoned it in the 1920s. And they're actually reintroducing it. There are now Nobel Prize winning scientific works that are coming back to a modern ether concept.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning there is something when there is nothing, right? Or what some scientists call the 0-point energy, or the quantum fluctuation, or the intelligent matrix. There's thousands of ideas, and when we are honest, we find that science
Sorry, George, you seem to have gone away. Can you come closer again?
Or maybe I was mumbling or leaning back too far from my computer. Is it better now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I was getting too comfortable here. So leaning back.
So I want to go back, George, to the coronavirus and 5G. I know you've mentioned this experiment, but I'm saying...
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that there is obviously a connection between microwave radiation and disease. I'm not sure if I want to participate in the outright demonization of 5G. I'm not sure that frequency is really the problem. Okay, let me say that. A lot of people are making a big story out of the 60,000 hertz and that it's the frequency of oxygen, and then it will, I'm not sure about that. There is one thing that most people don't know, that the higher the frequency, the lesser is the penetration into human tissue.
Mm-hmm.
The deepest penetration is actually with ultra low frequencies. That is why the American military, for example, has an emergency network for their atomic war scenarios. When everything is wiped out, they would send encrypted messages with 2 hertz. That is 2 pulses per second. And that is the so-called ELF network, mm-hmm. extremely low frequency, which actually penetrates through the earth and through oceans. That's what they use to communicate with submarines and so on.
I see, and that's a lot more harmful.
So people are mixing up these things. They think a higher frequency is more damaging. I'm not sure about that, actually. The higher the frequency, the less penetrating it is. Unfortunately, that means that they have to put more transmitters in order to have enough coverage, and that means that the electromagnetic soup that you are exposed to is becoming even thicker, because they are putting now an antenna every 500 meters instead of every 5 kilometers, because they have to, because otherwise it doesn't go through house walls and stuff like that.
Okay.
But I'm a bit careful, I use the internet and I use Wi-Fi and all that. I'm not a kind of an anti-technology rebel, but it might be better to have more glass fiber cable and less of stuff whizzing through the air.
I agree. George, you also sell these 5G tower busters, don't you? I've seen that on your website.
Yeah, you see, that's basically that we have been making tower busters for ages. That is basically a simple disc of Orgonite with quartz crystals and a few other minerals and metal filings and resin. And that is sufficient for a normal cell phone tower. And because of the increased intensity of the 5G, we've come up with an enhanced mix, which we now call the 5G equalizer, because it's got shungite in it, which is has become quite well known lately. It's a mineral from Russia that is based on carbon. So it's basically somewhere between anthracite coal and a diamond. It's like highly compressed carbon, but it's not yet a diamond. And it has a lot of interesting properties in terms of radiation protection, to the point that in Russia it's so popular they put it into house paint to protect themselves, and they make cell phone chips out of pure shungite, like little discs that you attach to your cell phone and stuff like that. So on its own, it already has very similar properties to Orgonite. It's very energizing and does a similar thing to Orgonite. And we put that into these tower busters, these 5G equalizers, and another mineral that we have found here in South Africa, which is called galenite, and that has relatively high percentages of silver and lead in it. And lead is already known as a radiation-absorbing material. Mm-hmm. You know that when you do X-raying, you have lead aprons. You know, and so it's got a high absorption factor for this kind of radiation. And so far the feedback is quite positive.
Very good, very good. Can somebody use that in their home? I know you said this is for cell phone towers.
You don't. I mean, it's not restricted to 5G masts because, as I say, the quality, the energetic effect of microwave radiation is similar, no matter whether you have a 4G network or a 5G network. The 5G network may have other problems like the increased sheer intensity of it, you know, which will be rolled out in order to cover every nook and cranny. And obviously it's not very conducive for a soft organism like ours that's based 90% on water, you know, when you cook it with microwave all the time. Can't really be too healthy.
Okay, so now, George, I want to move on from this topic to another key question about the coronavirus and the cloudbusters. So my question is, as we all know, that the coronavirus has caused widespread negative energy, a lot of fear, a lot of fear, a lot of negative energy. People are scared to leave their houses. They're scared to meet other people. They'd rather be isolated at home than socialize, and this has all been, people are totally brainwashed to just, they can't leave their houses. So there's a lot of fear going around. There's a lot of negative energy. So my question is, as well as Zappers and Orgonite and everything, you also have this thing called the Cloudbusters, right? Now, it's a really big device. I've seen it on your website. So my question is, can the Cloudbuster help with shifting this negative energy pattern? Because that's what everybody seems to be having right now. A lot of negativity, a lot of bad thinking about the whole thing, and it seems to be a lot of fear porn, as you can say. So do you think that the Cloudbuster can help with moving and shifting this negative energy?
Let me first explain what it is, and I think all these things work together, actually. The Cloudbuster is, as you said, quite a big device. It's consisting of a large base of Orgonite, which does exactly the same that it does in a tower buster, only that it's basically a 10-liter bucket size. And then there are 6 copper pipes that are open to the sky, and there are quartz crystals in the bottom. These copper pipes are stuck into the Orgonite base, and in their bottom they have a crystal which acts as an antenna. So what the Cloudbuster does is it's drawing in the energy from the sky. So we have seen this in the past mostly as a thing to clear the sky energy over a very large area, especially in a situation where you have artificially induced droughts and where you have lots of chemtrails. Chemtrails is a whole different story, a whole different kind of worms to talk about. It seems to help the sky to dissolve these chemtrails. Now, I think the cloudbuster needs the support of a few hundred tower busters neutralizing the cell phone towers, and that is probably for that lingering negative energy. The neutralizing of the cell phone towers is probably the most important part. It's even more important than putting up cloudbusters. It's a bit like, if you see this in a metaphor as etheric warfare, then you have infantry and you have artillery.
Mm-hmm.
And artillery doesn't work without infantry because it gets overwhelmed by the enemy masses. And infantry without artillery also gets wiped out. So you need both. And I mean, I've never participated, thank God, in any active war, but we all have seen movies or read, accounts of historic warfare, so we all have a picture of how this works. So we need both, we need cloudbusters, but we must also not make the mistake and say, okay, I put this one big machine and it must solve all the problems. You still have to do good work and neutralize all these little towers, and basically all it needs to do is a stroll with a dog and put 10 or 15 of these little thingies in your pockets and walk your neighborhood wherever these towers are standing, hide it somewhere in the bush or dig it in or whatever you need to do in order to make it stay there permanently. And it doesn't have to be directly on the tower. It can be even within 500 meters. It will still be effective.
Okay, because I don't think that work has been done, to my knowledge, in around the UK.
There are some people. There are even some forums, and there have been activists. I'm not sure because everybody does that on their own, and people wake up to this kind of work and maybe do it for 2 or 3 years, and then sometimes they stop it again. We've been quite persistent with it, but others I've noticed have sort of come onto the scene and done something for 2, 3 years and then got into something else, So it's not a coordinated effort, and it will never be. It just doesn't lend itself to that, People have tried to create forums and things and do mapping and like, okay, you do this, I do that. It doesn't really work like that. People sometimes feel compelled to do this work and they go where they feel that the energy is particularly bad and they do something there. And there are some forums. I think there is one on Facebook, one group called Orgon or orgons.uk or something like that, or Orgon UK. So it's not that nobody has ever done it, but I'm sure there is a lot to be done, and in a highly industrialized country like in the UK, you need to do a lot more than in large parts of Africa, where sometimes a few hundred pieces can make a fantastic difference.
Yeah, I mean, here there are new cell phone towers going up all the time, everywhere.
Absolutely. And with the rollout of 5G, so the main message that we can put out is start protecting your home and then start expanding in concentric circles. That your next level of concern would be the cell phone towers within 5 kilometers of where you live, because they will directly influence you. And then the next thing will be your workplace and where your children go to school and all that, and then if you start liking this work, then you might start making your own Orgonite. It's not a big secret. It's never been intended to be a secret.
So you can make this yourself, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I love selling it, but people who start gifting in terms of hundreds of tower busters may start finding it better to make it themselves.
Very interesting.
Depends on whether you want to get your hands dirty and sticky with resin or that, or whether you'd rather prefer the convenience of ready-made.
So you've gone afar again, George. Can you come closer?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Better.
Very, very interesting. So this is something, if anybody wants to get involved, if they have an interest and they want to gift these tower busters, they can do that by making it themselves, because obviously it's a lot cheaper. You just have to get the material and then you just
Yes.
have to know how to put it together.
Yeah, we actually have a little video about how to make simple Orgonite tower busters, and we have a series of pictures. So it's on our website, organiseafrica.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is an info section. You click on info, and then you find Orgonite info, or Orgonite wiki, I think it's called now. And there is a DIY section as well.
Okay, I'm gonna go check it out. I'm really excited now. Maybe I can make it myself if it's not too difficult. I can give it a
No, it's
try.
not. See, those tower busters don't have to be pretty. It takes some experience to make pretty Orgonite, and there are some recipes that we will maybe not share with everybody because we like to have an edge in some things. But your daily gifting Orgonite is very easy to make. You just need a muffin pan, some polyester resin, and some metal filings and some crystals, quartz crystals, and that's the whole story.
But then you have to join them together, right? In a mold. You have to
Yeah,
put
it's not.
them.
I mean, that's why I'm saying muffin pan. Muffin pan is just the right size. Those 12 muffin trays.
Oh, you mean like a cupcake trays?
Cupcake.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
We call them muffins here in South Africa. I know. I thought it was British originally, but yeah, cupcake form.
Okay. I'll be sure to check it out, and I'm sure if anybody else is interested
Mhm.
to look at this video, check it out to see if you can make it yourself. I don't see why not. But if it's not for you, you can buy them.
If you want 4 or 5 of them just to put around your house and start protecting yourself, it's not worth the whole effort, But if you become a prolific gifter and you want to do more of that, it's almost inevitable that you start making them yourself. I've seen that happening with many people, and it's absolutely encouraged. We're not trying to pretend that we have secrets where we don't. No, this is actually meant to be a self-help movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If it's not a secret. If anybody wants to know how they can make it themselves or is interested, they can
See,
check out this video.
if it was a secret, they would have probably shut us down already.
Yeah.
So keeping this open source, Don Croft has never intended to keep this as a secret. He shared this from the beginning, and he actually never made Orgonite for sale. He basically lived from making the Zappers. And his wife was making special Orgonite pendants, because she's quite an intuitive, psychic person, and
she's a clairvoyant.
Yeah, and she's very energy sensitive, so she makes very special pendants, and they've just done these two things, but never tried to make money out of the tower busters or the orgon cones or the cloud busters, And I think that was a very good move because it encouraged the growth of a large network of organ sellers and organ activists. And, we've basically come out of the early days of this type of movement that Don Croft started originally. So we've been around since 2002. And that's pretty much, I think Don built his first Orgonite cloudbuster in 2001 or something like that.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. A very exciting field to be involved with. This can help people. It can protect you. As we've discovered today, using a zapper can help with bacteria, viruses, parasites, worms.
Don't forget the creepy crawlies, exactly. Those little hookworms.
Exactly, yeah. So this is a personal hygiene protection device to actually kill off all this bacteria that's in your colon, in your body, that resides there. So you can invest in a zapper. You can invest in a zapper. We actually sell it on our website. We are one of your UK suppliers. So if anybody's interested in getting their hands on a zapper, we actually sell them here at healthparadigm.co.uk. If you actually want to know anything more about Orgonite, how it works, how to make any of these tower busters, there are lots of information, there's lots of videos, and you can find out all this information if you go on George's website, which is organiseafrica.eu, and Orgonise is ORGONISE Africa.eu, so it's a play on words. So thank you very much, George, for your time today. I really appreciate everything that you've said. Extremely interesting conversation, and hopefully this is good food for thought, and this will get people interested and engaged and want to find out more about how they can get a zapper and how it works. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.